Dahan was just another cargo worker on Station Verity until the raiders came. Black ships, armed slavers, screaming in the corridors. Everyone ran to safety. But Dahan heard something no one else could ignore. A young girl being dragged away. Unarmed, outmatched, he grabbed a cargo hook and charged. 7 seconds. 2 raiders down. The galaxy thought humans were soft, civilized, harmless. They were wrong. When Dion's rage ignited, it wasn't violence, it was protection. He saved Lyra, a fragile alien girl who felt every ounce of his fury. She should have feared him. Instead, she held his hand. Now the Union knows what humans really are. And the question that will decide everything. Will they become the galaxy's greatest guardians or its most dangerous threat? His choice starts now. Dahan had been working the cargo docks of Station Verity for 3 standard months when he first saw the raiders. The station orbited a quiet mining world on the edge of civilized space, where a dozen different species traded peacefully under the watch of the Galactic Union. Humans were still new here, still viewed with curiosity by the established races who had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. They thought humans were soft, pleasant creatures who smiled too much and got emotional over small things. Dahan had learned not to correct them. He was loading containers onto a transport ship when the alarms began their shrill warning. Through the transparent dome overhead, 3 unmarked vessels appeared, their hulls black and scarred. Pirates. They moved with practiced efficiency, cutting through the station's outer defenses like they were nothing. Dahan's supervisor, a tall insectoid named Thriss, clicked his mandibles in distress and ordered all workers to the safe rooms. Everyone ran. Dahan ran too, at first thought, then he heard the screaming. The sound came from Corridor 7, where the residential quarters began. Dahan stopped, his heart hammering in his chest. The safe room was close, just around the corner. He could make it. He should make it. But the screaming continued, high-pitched and terrified, and his feet were already turning, already carrying him toward the sound instead of away from it. His supervisor's voice crackled in his comm unit, ordering him back, but Dahan switched it off. The corridor was chaos. Raiders in mismatched armor were hauling people from their quarters, stunning anyone who resisted. Most victims were small, the species the Union considered delicate. Dahan saw them taking a group toward the docking bay and understood immediately. Slavers. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. That was when he saw her. She was young, maybe equivalent to a human teenager, with pale blue skin and large eyes that reflected light like a cat's. Her species was called the Velen, and Dahan had learned they were peaceful. Artists and philosophers who had never known war. 2 raiders were dragging her by her thin arms, and she was crying, making sounds of pure terror that cut through everything else. Dahan did not think. Thinking was dangerous. Thinking meant remembering that he was alone, unarmed, and that humans were supposed to be civilized now. Instead, he grabbed a cargo hook from the wall and moved. The first raider did not see him coming. Dahan swung the hook into the back of his knee, and the joint bent wrong with a crack that echoed off the metal walls. The raider went down screaming. The second one turned, bringing up his weapon, but Dahan was already inside his guard. He drove his elbow into the raider's throat, then brought the hook around to catch him behind the neck and pull him down. The raider's helmet cracked against the floor, and he stopped moving. It took 7 seconds. The Velen girl stared at him with her huge eyes, trembling. She had backed against the wall, her hands pressed to her mouth. Dahan forced himself to breathe, to release the hook before his hands locked around it permanently. He raised his palms slowly, the universal gesture for peace. "It's okay," he said quietly, though he knew she probably did not understand the words. "I won't hurt you. I'm going to get you somewhere safe." She did not move. Her eyes were fixed on the raiders, on the unnatural angles of their bodies. Then she looked at Daeun's face, and whatever she saw there made her flinch. Daeun had been told that human expressions were hard for other species to read. They did not have the context for the micro-movements of facial muscles, the meanings carried in the set of a jaw, or the tightness around the eyes. But fear was apparently universal, because this girl could clearly read that she had traded one danger for something she did not understand. He took a slow breath and smiled. It felt wrong on his face, artificial, but he held it. "My name is Daeun," he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to her, raising his eyebrows in question. She hesitated for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was musical, each word like a note. "Lyra," she whispered. "Lyra," Daeun repeated, and her eyes widened slightly at hearing her name in his rough pronunciation. "Come with me, please." He extended his hand, palm up, non-threatening. She stared at his hand. Her own hands were long-fingered, delicate, with skin so thin he could see the veins beneath. Slowly, so slowly, she reached out. When her fingers touched his palm, they were cold and shaking. Daeun gently closed his hand around hers and felt her flinch again at his warmth, at the calluses on his skin. He kept his grip loose, ready to let go if she pulled away. She did not. Instead, she stepped closer, and Daeun led her down the corridor, away from the bodies, toward the residential safe rooms. They almost made it. 3 more raiders appeared at the intersection ahead, weapons raised. Daeun stopped, placing himself between them and Lyra. His mind raced through options. No weapons. No cover. 3 against 1. The math was not good. The lead raider laughed, a harsh sound through his helmet speaker. He said something in a language Daeun did not know, but the meaning was clear enough. The raider gestured at Lyra with his weapon, then at the floor. Surrender or die. Daeun felt Lyra's hand tighten on his. She was so small behind him, barely coming to his shoulder. He thought about the safe room, about his supervisor Thriss, who always brought extra rations for workers who needed them, about the market vendor who had taught him to say, "Thank you," in 15 languages. He thought about Earth, about the mountains he had not seen in 2 years, about his grandmother who had survived a war and told him that surviving meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. His free hand found a pipe fixture on the wall. It was not meant to come loose, but Daeun pulled anyway. An old bolt shrieked and gave way. The pipe was heavy, solid metal, as long as his arm. The raider stopped laughing. "Run," Daeun said to Lyra without looking back. He let go of her hand. "When I move, you run to that door." He pointed to the safe room entrance, visible past the raiders. "Understand?" "No," Lyra said, and there was something new in her voice. Not just fear now. Determination. No leave you. Daeun's chest tightened. "I'll be right behind you," he lied, and moved. He went low, faster than the raiders expected, and the first burst of energy fire scorched the air above his head. The pipe caught the lead raider in the chest and folded him backward. Daeun spun, using momentum, and the pipe crashed into the second raider's weapon, sending it clattering away. An armored fist caught him in the ribs, and pain exploded through his side, but he kept moving. Had to keep moving. The third raider was aiming at him, finger on the trigger. When Lyra screamed "Dod," it was not a scream of fear. It was fury, high and piercing, and she threw herself at the raider's back, her delicate hands clawing at his helmet. The raider stumbled, surprised, and his shot went wild. It was the opening Daeun needed. He brought the pipe down on the raider's arm, and the weapon fell. Then again on his helmet, and the raider collapsed. Silence fell, broken only by their harsh breathing. Daeun turned to Lyra. She was shaking violently, staring at her own hands like she did not recognize them. He wanted to comfort her, but his ribs were screaming, and there might be more raiders coming. Instead, he took her hand again and ran. The safe room door recognized his biosignature and opened. Inside, dozens of station residents huddled together, including Thriss, whose antennae shot up when he saw Diane and Lyra stumble through the entrance. The door sealed behind them with a hiss. "You fool!" Thriss clicked, but there was relief in his voice. "You incredible fool." Daehan slid down the wall, his legs finally giving out. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the shakes and the pain and the knowledge of what he had done. Lyra knelt beside him immediately, her hands hovering over his body like she wanted to help but did not know how. "I'm okay," Daehan managed, though his ribs suggested otherwise. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, those huge eyes still fixed on his face. She touched his cheek with one cold finger, tracing the line of his jaw, and said something in her language that he did not understand. But the tone was clear. Wonder, fear, gratitude, confusion. Thriss was talking into a comm unit, reporting to station security. Other residents were staring at Daehan with expressions he could not read. He had the sudden, sinking feeling that he had made a mistake. Not in saving Lyra, but in how he had done it. In showing them what humans could be when pushed. Lyra was still touching his face, her fingers gentle. She said his name, Daehan, and it sounded like music in her voice. Then she pressed her forehead to his shoulder and began to cry, soft sounds that broke his heart. Daehan wrapped his arms around her carefully, ignoring the pain in his ribs, and held her while she shook. Around them, the other residents whispered to each other in a dozen languages, and Daehan knew that everything had changed. Station security arrived 20 minutes later and cleared the raiders from Verity. The attackers, who could still walk, were taken into custody. The rest were taken to medical. Daehan was also taken to medical, despite his protests, where a Velen doctor with the same pale blue skin as Lyra treated his cracked ribs with scanners and medicine that made his whole torso go numb. The doctor did not speak to him. No one did, not really. They were professional, efficient, but there was something in the way they moved around him now, a careful distance that had not been there before. Lyra stayed by his side the entire time. She had not let go of his hand since the safe room, and even when the doctor needed to examine him, she only moved enough to give access while maintaining that contact. Her presence was the only thing keeping him grounded. After the medical checks, a Union officer arrived to take his statement. She was from a species Daehan did not recognize, with gray skin and multiple arms. She asked him to describe what happened in Corridor 7. Daehan told her, keeping his voice flat and factual. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You killed 2 beings," she finally said. It was not a question. "I stopped them from taking Lyra and others," Daehan replied. "They were armed. I wasn't. You used lethal force. I used the force necessary to protect innocent people from slavers." The officer's face was unreadable. Humans have violence limitations under Union integration protocols. You were supposed to retreat and let security handle the situation. Daehan felt anger kindle in his chest. Security didn't arrive until after. If I had retreated, Lyra would be gone. So would the others. Perhaps, the officer said, but you would not have taken 2 lives. Lyra made a sound, sharp and distressed. She spoke rapidly in her own language, her free hand gesturing emphatically. The officer's expression shifted slightly. "She says you saved her," the officer translated. "She says the raiders would have taken her to a fate worse than death. She asks why you judge her protector." "I'm not judging," the officer said carefully. "I am following protocol. This incident will be reviewed. Until then, Daehan of Earth, you are confined to your quarters except for medical appointments." They let him go back to his small room in the workers' section. Lyra followed, and no one stopped her. When the door closed behind them, Daehan finally let himself feel the weight of what had happened. He sat on his bunk and put his head in his hands. Lyra sat beside him. After a moment, she began to hum, a soft melody that reminded him of wind through trees. It was beautiful and sad, and Dae-yeon found his breathing slowing to match its rhythm. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying." She tilted her head, not understanding the words, but understanding the meaning. She took his hand again and held it between both of hers, warming his cold fingers with her touch. Over the next few days, a strange thing happened. Lyra began to teach him her language, and he taught her his. They started with simple words, pointing at objects and repeating names. Table, teva, door, limb, water, sira. Her voice made even harsh human words sound musical, and has made her delicate language sound grounded. Solid dot. She learned that he came from a place called Earth, from mountains that touched the clouds. He learned that she came from Velen Prime, from floating cities that danced on water. She had been traveling to study art at a Union Academy when the transport was attacked. Her family thought she was dead. Dae-yeon helped her send a message home. When her parents' faces appeared on the com screen and they saw their daughter alive, Lyra broke down crying again, and Dae-yeon stepped out to give them privacy. When he came back an hour later, her eyes were red but peaceful. "They want meet you," she said in careful, halting standard. "Thank you for Lyra life." Dae-yeon shook his head. Anyone would have done the same. Lyra looked at him strangely. "No," she said firmly. "Others run. You stay. You fight. You save." She touched his chest over his heart. "Strong here. Brave here." The Union review took 3 days. During that time, Lyra stayed with Dae-yeon, sleeping on the floor of his quarters despite his protests. She seemed afraid that if she left, something would happen to him. Maybe she was right to worry. He had heard whispers from other workers, seeing the way station residents watched him now with a mix of fear and respect that made his skin crawl. Thriss visited once, bringing food. "You have caused quite a stir," the insectoid said, setting down containers of nutrient paste. "Half the station thinks you are a hero. The other half thinks you are dangerous. What do you think?" Dae-yeon asked. Thriss's antennae twitched. "I think you are young and brave, and very, very foolish. I also think that little one would be gone if not for you. So perhaps foolish is not so bad." On the 3rd day, the Union officer returned with others. They wore formal uniforms and their expressions were grave. Dae-yeon stood to face them, and Lyra stood with him, her hand finding his. "Dae-yeon of Earth," the lead officer began. "The Union Council has reviewed your actions during the Raider attack. We have concluded that while your methods were extreme by our standards, they were justified given the circumstances. No charges will be filed." Relief flooded through him. "Thank you." "However," the officer continued, and Dae-yeon's relief evaporated, "we must address the larger issue. Your species is new to the Union, and this incident has raised concerns about human integration, specifically about human capacity for violence and what triggers it." "He'd protect," Lyra said suddenly, her standard clumsy but fierce. "Bad people hurt, he stop. This wrong?" The officer looked at her kindly. "No, young one. But there are protocols, ways of handling such situations that minimize harm. Your protector bypassed all of them." "Protocols take time," Dae-yeon said quietly. "People like Lyra don't have time when raiders are dragging them away." "That is precisely the conflict," another officer said, stepping forward. This one was elderly, with skin like bark and eyes that had seen centuries. "The Union has maintained peace for 10,000 years through strict adherence to protocols. We do not act on instinct. We assess, communicate, and resolve through established procedures. Those procedures failed," Dae-yeon pointed out. "The raiders were inside the station, grabbing people. Where was security?" "Overwhelmed," the old officer admitted. "Which brings us to our proposal. Humanity has capabilities that other species lack. Physical strength, pain tolerance, aggression that can be directed when needed. We would like to establish a new division within Union security, staffed by humans, trained to handle situations where immediate physical intervention is necessary. Daehyun stared. You want us to be your soldiers. We want you to be guardians, the officer corrected. Protectors for those who cannot protect themselves. But trained, controlled, working within Union law. And if I refuse? The officer's bark-like face crinkled. Then you remain here, a dock worker, and we pretend this incident never revealed what your species truly is. But I think you already know that pretending helps no one. Daehyun looked at Lyra. She was watching him with those huge eyes, understanding only pieces of the conversation, but clearly aware of its weight. She squeezed his hand. I need to think about it, he said finally. The officers accepted this and left. When they were gone, Lyra turned to him. They want you fight? She asked, something like that. She was quiet for a moment, then said, You good at protect. I see, but... She struggled for the words. Not just fight. You are kind. Strong and kind. Rare thing. Daehyun felt his throat tighten. I didn't feel kind when I was hitting those raiders. I felt angry. Furious. I wanted to hurt them for trying to take you. Lyra nodded slowly. Rage, she said, testing the word. Human rage. I see in your eyes. Scary. Then she touched his face again. That gesture she had done before. But only for bad people. Not for me. Never for me. That night, unable to sleep, Daehyun sat at his small desk and accessed the station's database. He looked up the species called Velen and learned that they were empaths, able to feel the emotions of those around them. No wonder Lyra had been so terrified in that corridor. She had not just seen his violence. She had felt his rage, his fury, the cold determination to destroy anyone who threatened the innocent. And yet she stayed. He found her watching him from the makeshift bed on the floor. In the dim light, her eyes glowed softly. Cannot sleep? She asked. Thinking too much, he replied. I read about your people. You feel emotions. Mine must have been terrible in that corridor. Lyra sat up, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. Yes, she admitted. Terrible. Like fire and ice together. Like storm. She paused. But under rage, other feeling. Protect. Care. Love for life. She smiled slightly. You think you are monster. But I feel truth. You are guardian. Officers are right. What if I become what I'm fighting against? Daehyun asked, voicing the fear that had kept him awake. What if that rage takes over? Lyra stood and crossed to him, kneeling beside his chair. She took both his hands. Then I remind you, she said simply. I feel who you are. Real you. And if you forget, I make remember. Something in Daehyun's chest loosened? You would stay with me? Even knowing what I can do. Especially knowing, she replied. Because you do for right reason. And because... She blushed, a darker blue spreading across her pale cheeks. Because you are first person make me feel safe since attack. First person I trust. Maybe first person I... She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. Daehyun understood. In the space of a few days, trauma and rescue and constant proximity had forged something between them that neither could quite name yet. It was too soon for love, but it was something real, something worth protecting. If I do this, he said slowly, join this new security division, would you come with me? As a translator, maybe? Or a liaison? The Union would need people who understand both sides. Lyra's eyes brightened. Yes, she said immediately. Yes, I come. We work together. We show them human and Velen can be team. Can be. She searched for the word. Partners. Partners, Dayan echoed and smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had managed since the attack, and Lyra's face lit up in response. The next morning, Dayan gave the Union officers his answer. He would join their new security division on 3 conditions. First, that Lyra be assigned as his permanent liaison and cultural advisor. Second, that all human security personnel receive extensive training in Union law and de-escalation techniques before being deployed. Third, that humans never be used as simple weapons, but as a last resort when all other options had failed. The officers conferred briefly, then agreed. Within a week, Dayan and Lyra were transferred to Union Central, the massive station at the heart of civilized space. Dayan began intensive training alongside 30 other humans recruited from various colonies and stations. Lyra attended special classes on human psychology and culture, becoming one of the first official human-villain liaisons. The program was not easy. Humans had to learn to control their instincts, to assess situations through the lens of Union protocols while maintaining their capacity for decisive action. There were failures, moments when someone acted too aggressively or misread a situation. But there were also successes, incidents where human security prevented tragedies that would have occurred while waiting for standard protocols. Through it all, Lyra and Dayan remained together. What had begun in trauma slowly transformed into something deeper. They learned each other's languages fluently. They learned each other's cultures, customs, fears, and dreams. Lyra taught Dayan to appreciate art and music in ways he never had. Dayan taught Lyra that strength and gentleness could coexist in the same person. 6 months after the Raider attack, they were assigned their first official mission together. A colony world was experiencing tensions between settlers and native species, and violence seemed imminent. Dayan and Lyra were sent as part of a peacekeeping team. The situation was delicate. The settlers felt threatened by the natives' territorial displays. The natives felt their sacred sites were being desecrated. Both sides were armed and angry, and standard Union mediators had made no progress. Lyra spent days speaking with both groups, using her empathic abilities to understand the true roots of their fear and anger. Dayan stood beside her, a quiet presence that somehow reassured both sides. His role was not to threaten, but to demonstrate that protection was possible without aggression. When extremists from the settler status attempted to bomb a native temple, Dayan was there. He intercepted them without killing anyone, using precisely the amount of force necessary and no more. The natives saw a human risk his life to protect their sacred place. The settlers saw that justice could be swift without being brutal. The tensions did not disappear overnight, but they began to ease. A framework for peaceful coexistence was established, with human security personnel providing neutral enforcement while Velen empaths facilitated understanding between the groups. On their last night on the colony, Dayan and Lyra stood under alien stars. The planet had 3 moons, and their combined light turned everything silver. "Success," Lyra said softly, leaning against Dayan's shoulder. Over months of proximity, physical contact had become natural between them. Small touches that spoke of trust and affection. This time, Dayan agreed. There will be failures too. Times when I can't control the situation, or make the wrong choice, or... Lyra pressed her fingers to his lips, stopping the words. "And I will be there," she said, "to remind you who you are, to feel your truth when you doubt. This is partnership, yes?" "Yes," Dayan said. Then, because the moment felt right, because her face was tilted up toward his, and her eyes held nothing but trust and something warmer, he asked, "Can I kiss you?" Lyra smiled, brilliant and beautiful. "I wait long time for you ask." Their first kiss was gentle, careful, a meeting of different species learning each other. Lyra's lips were cool against his, her breath sweet. When they parted, she was glowing faintly. A Velen response to strong emotion that Daehyun found endlessly fascinating. "I love you," he said, the words feeling both too large and too small for what he felt. "I know," Lyra replied, touching his face in that familiar gesture. "I feel it every day. And I love you. Your strength, your kindness, your rage that burns only for justice. All of you." They stood together under the triple moons. A human and a Velen, a guardian and an empath. Two people who had found each other in the worst moment and chosen to build something beautiful from it. Back on Union Central, in a secured database, a formal trauma report was filed by the officers who had first responded to the Raider attack. It detailed the incident in clinical terms, but ended with a note that would become famous in Union history. "Today we witnessed the first recorded instance of human protective rage. Subject Daehyun displayed extreme violence in defense of the innocent, acting without hesitation or apparent fear. Initial assessment, terrifying. Secondary assessment, invaluable. Recommendation, establish Human Security Division immediately. Note, subject's bond with rescued individual appears to have provided emotional stabilization. Further study recommended on human capacity for love as counterbalance to capacity for violence." Years later, Daehyun and Lyra would read that report together and laugh at the clinical language trying to describe their relationship. By then, they had served together for 5 years, prevented countless tragedies, and were training the next generation of human-alien security partnerships. They had also married in a ceremony that blended Earth and Velen traditions, witnessed by representatives from 50 different species. But that first night, under the alien stars, they simply held each other and knew that they had found something rare in the vast universe. A partner who saw all of you, the light and the darkness, and chose to stay anyway. Daehyun had learned that his rage could be a tool for protection rather than destruction. Lyra had learned that strength took many forms, and the strongest people were often the most gentle. Together, they became the model for a new kind of partnership in the galaxy. Proof that even the most unlikely combinations could create something extraordinary. The human who filed a trauma report became the human who wrote a love story. One act of violence transformed into a lifetime of protection and devotion. And in the end, that was the most human thing of all.